What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. Ever since the beginning of Season 2, League of Legends has always had an extremely refined meta. You have the 2 solo lanes, the dual bot, and a jungler on each team in pretty much all of your games. And there are very legitimate reasons for the precise way the meta is set up like this, and never really tends to stray from it either. And I think it's safe to say that most people understand what the meta is, but not that many people have an understanding of why the meta is the way that it is. Let's get started. Now, the technical definition of meta is the select group of strategies that happen to be popular at the current time. One thing that's always been super interesting to me is if we take a look at other games, for example Dota 2, Smite, and Heroes of the Storm, they don't really have refined metas. They certainly have meta strategies and meta champions, but the lane setup in League is so cut and dry compared to any other game I've ever seen. And the thing is that games like Dota 2 don't have overarching strategies like League does. And it's not like Dota 2 isn't an established game. I mean, there's been more than enough time for the players to find a refined meta like League, but they haven't. And it's because unlike in League, there is no one select strategy that is better than everything else. The current meta is actually quite smart in League in that it's focused on maximizing the resources available on the current map, resources being the kills, farm, and objectives. Let's take a deeper look. Starting in the mid lane, this is the role that gets EXP the fastest in the game, so we put champions who are casters, champions who tend to rely on their abilities to be successful because they will level up the fastest and thus benefit most from the nature of mid lane to give the most experience, and these types of champions usually tend to dominate the mid game due to their advantage in levels at that point. At the same time, these caster champions are a lot squishier than most, and so they get the safety of being in a shorter lane. Down at the bot lane, we have the AD carry and the 0 CS support. AD carries are champions who scale extremely well with gold, since they have really expensive builds that have items that all scale off of each other, so they're put in the bot lane with a support to help keep them safe while they farm up for a really long time to completely dominate the late game teamfights. And support champions tend to have extremely high utility, and so they don't need gold at all, so you can put them with the AD carry to babysit them and let them soak up all of the gold from the lane. In the meantime, supports build items that are cheap and extremely cost efficient, who can be really successful without having to take gold from anyone else on the team. Up above we have the top lane, which is isolated a lot from the rest of the game due to Dragon being a prominent early game objective focus. The main thing with top lane, be it tanks or bruisers or the mages that end up there, is that pretty much all top laners are not that powerful until they farm up one major item. So they're put in the top lane since the isolation lets them farm up for that one major item until they have to affect the rest of the map. Teleport also allows them to impact the rest of the map too, and causes you to be unable to put a carry champion in the top lane, since teleport is so necessary for early game teamfighting, and a combat summoner spell is so important for a carry-esque champion. And lastly, we have the jungler, who focuses on maximizing the resources of the jungle and of the enemy champions through farming and ganks, and so are an extra force to help the laners not fall behind early, as well as to help secure Dragon and Baron with their smite. Next, let's take a look at the types of champions. This is the part of the League meta that is a little bit more loose and open to different setups because it doesn't actually improve the way that you maximize resources on the map most of the time. A team composition is built around creating synergies between champions and their playstyles while maximizing the power, but in a general sense, on a team you tend to have carries who build full damage, and then people to help support those carries in some way, like your tanks and your supports, the carries really being any role that builds a lot of damage. Obviously this is a loose interpretation, but the point is that a meta team comp always has carries and then people who help those carries. Since you have 5 champions on a team, you also pretty much always have at least 1 or 2 champions who doesn't fall into that category and can be a bit more dynamic, which is something like where bruisers and sometimes assassins fall into place. Now, this varies heavily depending on what kind of items and which champions are powerful, but in a general sense, that's how team comps tend to be built. And it's like this since you need to have champions that are a big source of damage in order to teamfight effectively. And with this setup, you can have 2 champions build full damage, and it also fits into the lane setups quite nicely. In addition, powerful items also are really going to affect what is a powerful champion in the meta, as items have a huge effect on a champion's power. And so essentially the meta is what it is because it works so damn well and is so much better than any other strategy at maximizing the resources available to a team. And because of this, breaking the meta is really hard because any other strategy like a double jungle does not maximize the resources on the map, and so they are objectively worse strategies since they will get less gold or experience or both compared to the meta strategy. However, breaking the meta doesn't always feel that difficult, and you can certainly have success with it in solo queue, because in League, skill is going to be the biggest deciding factor in every game. So you can totally break the meta, but if you're a better player than your opponents, you can make anything work really by just outplaying them. So you can make suboptimal strategies feel powerful when they might not be, just by being a better player. So it makes breaking the meta feel a lot easier than it actually is, and it also makes it extremely hard to judge how good a strategy is. As well, strategies that break the meta in this way do have some sort of benefit to them, since players are really not used to playing against those kinds of things at all. So the surprise factor is something that can make it work, but in the long run, it's never going to change the meta. And so in that sense, changing the meta is pretty much entirely in the hands of Riot. They have to actively make changes to influence the meta by changing items or champions or some parts of the resources on the map. Some examples of this are Cinderhulk resulting in a tank-heavy meta in terms of an item change, and the new Mordekaiser, who might actually change out the bot lane meta by quite a bit, depending on how strong he is. But Riot does like to change the meta quite a bit because it keeps their game quite fresh and overall reasonably healthy as well. And so on the other hand, what does work, and we can see proof of this in competitive play, is strategies that exploit the flaws in the current meta. Something like a 2v1 lane swap is a strategy that people do in order to ensure that their laners don't have to deal with a bad 1v1 or 2v2 matchup, while also not letting your opponent maximize the resources on the map better than you, and so overall it's a pretty reasonable strategy. So overall, any new strategies are going to be based on these things, since the meta is what it is really just because it is that much better than any other strategies.
Back of Uber news, halfway on my two shoes, engaged into a game that he sure to lose. Major symptomatic fecal flaws due to twisting, gutter flips and bats of both, and it's at my